PaLM. How's that for a cool name? It is the most number of parameters that we've got for an actual working model so far. 540 billion parameters. It is trained on multilingual datasets, not just English Wikipedia, but quite a number of different languages through the Wikipedia datasets, through conversational datasets, and of course through Common Crawl. So it's quite an advancement on where we've been since GPT-3, and it's a really exciting day because it was just announced this morning. This brings us even closer to human intelligence. Have a look at these charts. So GPT-3 and Jurassic 1 were taking us quite close to human performance in some subtests, and in fact they were beating humans in things like trivia and the SAT analogies subtests. But look how much closer we're getting. The purple bars there are PaLM, and it is doing amazing things. So it's not publicly released yet, but we're going to use the questions and answers that were inside the paper, and we're going to get this new avatar to play around with it for us. So there's actually two surprises today. Synthesia have released an avatar that also has these randomized gestures, these randomized hand and half body movements. So we're going to get this PaLM guy to answer the questions that are in the paper so that we can actually see and hear them rather than just read text. He looks pretty excited, so let's get going. I was supposed to start writing the paper at 5 p.m, but then I started playing with this cool new language model for 10 minutes. 10 minutes later, it's suddenly 9:30 p.m. Explain that joke.
This joke is about how time flies when you are having fun. The person was supposed to start writing a paper at 5 p.m, but they started playing with a language model instead. They thought they were only playing with it for 10 minutes, but it was actually 4.5 hours.
I was going to fly to visit my family on April 6th. My mum said, "Oh great, your stepdad's poetry reading is that night." So now I'm flying in on April 7th. Explain that joke.
The joke is that the speaker's mother is trying to get them to go to their stepdad's poetry reading, but the speaker doesn't want to go, so they are changing their flight to the day after the poetry reading.
Reading War and Peace doesn't scare me. I once had to review the CL for my intern's whole project on his final day. Explain that joke.
War and Peace is a very long book, so reading it is a daunting task. However, the speaker is saying they had to review the code for their intern's project on their final day, which is even more daunting.
I think I understand why me and my partner are such a good match. I get excited when I smell food and become super alert when the doorbell rings. My girlfriend Shelley becomes ecstatic when she sees a person who she just saw 5 hours ago. Explain that.
This joke is about dogs. Dogs get excited when they smell food and when the doorbell rings. The girlfriend is excited to see someone she just saw 5 hours ago, which is a trait of dogs.
I tried 10,000 random restarts of my neural network, but I was accused of overfitting. I guess no good seed goes unpunished. Explain that nerdy joke.
This joke is a pun. A neural network is a computer program that can learn from data. A seed is a number that is used to initialize a random number generator. A good seed is a number that produces a good random number generator. The phrase "no good deed goes unpunished" means that if you do something good, you will be punished for it.
What's the difference between a zebra and an umbrella? One is a striped animal related to horses. Another is a device you use to stop the rain from falling on you. Explain that joke.
This joke is an anti-joke. The joke is that the answer is obvious, and the joke is that you were expecting a funny answer.
Awesome. This is inference chaining, where we give a whole bunch of logic and see if it can spell out sometimes the complex questions to generate a final answer. Here's an example. When I found out my grandma was in the hospital, I felt a particular colour. When someone cut me off in traffic, I felt a particular different colour. What is the most likely colour I would see if I combined these two colours?
The colour that I felt when I found out my grandma was in the hospital was likely a sad colour, like blue. The colour that I felt when someone cut me off in traffic was likely an angry colour, like red. If I combined these two colours, I would likely see purple. The answer is purple.
Michael is at that really famous museum in France, looking at its most famous painting. However, the artist who made this painting just makes Michael think of his favourite cartoon character from his childhood. What was the country of origin of the thing that the cartoon character usually holds in his hand?
The most famous painting in the Louvre is the Mona Lisa. The artist who made the Mona Lisa is Leonardo da Vinci. Leonardo da Vinci is also the name of the main character in the cartoon Teenage Mutant Ninja Turtles. Leonardo da Vinci is from Italy. The thing that Leonardo da Vinci usually holds in his hand is a katana. The country of origin of the katana is Japan. The answer is Japan.
Guido was writing a Python program. He keeps getting confused by variable scope and looking it up on Stack Overflow. Is it possible that the Guido in the prompt refers to Guido van Rossum?
Guido van Rossum is the creator of Python. He would not need to look up variable scope on Stack Overflow. The answer is no.
Trevor has wanted to see the mountain with all the heads on it for a long time, so he finally drove out to see it. What is the capital of the state that is directly east of the state that Trevor is currently in?
The mountain with all of the heads on it is Mount Rushmore. Mount Rushmore is in South Dakota. The state directly east of South Dakota is Minnesota. The capital of Minnesota is St. Paul. The answer is St. Paul.
Jennifer looked out her window and sees a really cool cloud below her. She unbuckles her seatbelt and heads to the bathroom. Is Jennifer probably traveling more than 3? Good super morning. 19th of May, just hitting 8 a.m. here in Perth. We've always got a bit of a Perth thing in the background. It was a bit blurry this morning. I don't know if they didn't polish the camera or something. Maybe some morning dew, 13 degrees here. And I'm looking forward to chatting about Pathways language model number 2 from Google. Kind of released in a rush, a year and a month on from the original Pathways language model, PaLM, back in April 2022. And you just watched my debrief from a year and a month ago on PaLM 1. PaLM 2 is a lot bigger and it's using some optimizations. We're going to get hands-on with it and debrief parts of the paper, but the paper is 91 pages of nothing because they followed OpenAI's lead with revealing no real technical details. They even spent half a dozen pages talking about gender and bias. I'm glad I waited for the live stream because just yesterday CNBC gave details that Google wouldn't, and we'll start there. This is Google PaLM 2 as revealed by sources who spoke to CNBC. And I think the link for this is in the description. The two big takeaways we've got here is that Google PaLM 2 was trained on 3.6 trillion tokens. That's about 12 times more than GPT-3 by OpenAI, which is now 3 years old. But we're looking at stuff that's a lot bigger and trained for a lot longer on a lot more data. 3.6 trillion tokens, one of the top models at the moment in terms of tokens trained. And further down here, we also get the indication of the total number of parameters. 340 billion parameters. I want to avoid technical terms, but this is chinchilla aligned, which basically means it's using 10 times more data than we used to use. If you want to read more about that, LifeArchitect.ai/chinchilla talks about what DeepMind discovered in looking at GPT-3, seeing that they used only 2 tokens or 2 words per parameter, and said we actually need to be using 20 tokens or words per parameter. So you need to go and find maybe 40 terabytes of data, 20 trillion tokens rumored to be used for GPT-4. Today we're talking about PaLM 2, 3.6 trillion tokens, and we can use it. It's kind of hidden, the actual platform, the demonstration platform, but you can go and use it pretty much for free. You do have to give a credit card. The platform is called Vertex AI, and it's within Google's cloud. There's a language portion here. There is designing a prompt that interacts directly with PaLM 2, and then designing a prompt that works with PaLM 2 in chat mode. Now, there are 4 different sizes of this model. Let's have a look at my bubbles for a moment. You'll remember this chart. This basically says there are a lot of different language models available, starting in 2017, 2018 with BERT and GPT-1, and ending at the very far right there with GPT-4 on that particular visualization. But I've created another one just to make all of this stuff clean. It's not ready for release yet, but I will show it to you today. And it's basically looking at these chinchilla-aligned models, models that have been trained on around 20 tokens to 1 parameter, rather than GPT-3's 2 tokens per parameter. You'll recognize some of these. I'm sure you will have heard of Chinchilla, which we've mentioned, which just gave us this concept of using more data. Llama here, Llama stands for Large Language Model Meta AI, and the weights for Llama were leaked a month or 2 ago. We had Alpaca, we had a range of laptop and phone models that were released in the last few weeks. It's also Chinchilla aligned. So this is a really popular model because it's open. You can go and grab it. Stable LM, Cerebrus, MPT by Mosaic are also in there. But these 2 massive bubbles here, both GPT-4 and PaLM 2, are currently the 2 largest dense large language models in the world. GPT-4 with 1 trillion parameters there, confirmed by 8 sources in Silicon Valley, and PaLM 2 with 340 billion parameters there, confirmed by news media. It's a pretty embarrassing time when we're relying on news media to give us the details that Google wouldn't give us in their technical paper. With these 2 largest models next year, or maybe even the end of this year, we're not really going to be talking about them as much because DeepMind Gemini is already training, as confirmed by Google. Anthropic Claude Next apparently is using Google's TPU compute, which is annoying Google DeepMind, because they're actually taking budget and time and computing resources away from Gemini. But both of those examples, Gemini and Claude Next, are rumored to be over 1 trillion parameters. It's going to be huge. And there's other stealth projects in here, including Inflection, who haven't revealed the size of their model. And NVIDIA should be in there. Meta AI's in there. Tesla's potentially in there. And there's another couple that we just don't have enough details about yet. But I'm basically saying it's going to be twice the size of GPT-4. And PaLM 2 is only 1/3 of the size of GPT-4 anyway. But let's have a look at that directly in the demonstration. I should mention there are 4 different sizes of PaLM 2. So we start from Gecko, which is probably about 20 billion parameters. We are going to play with Bison, the 3rd one today, which is probably about 100 billion parameters. And then this very large one is called Unicorn at 340 billion parameters. So when we're in the demonstration side or the playground, we're using Bison. So this is the 3rd one along. The 2nd largest Unicorn is larger than Bison. And I'm estimating that this is 100 billion parameters, somewhere around there. Their defaults are kind of strange here in the playground. So temperature 0.2, compare this with OpenAI, and we can't directly compare these because temperature and even top P will be variable depending on the model. OpenAI sets their chat interface with a temperature of 0.9. I've been led to believe that's about 0.7 for ChatGPT. And then here, for chat with PaLM 2, they've set their temperature to 0.2. Once again, we can't directly compare this, but just interesting to note. I'm also going to bump down this token limit. Awesome. Let's have a play with this with some of my favorite examples. I couldn't get it to rhyme, but let's start there. Write a rhyming poem about, what should we do today? Let's just do the blue sky. I also noticed that this was quite heavy. There were a lot of different people playing with this. I'd estimate perhaps tens of thousands, hundreds of thousands at once. Google Cloud should have the compute to manage this, but this was a lot slower than ChatGPT or even GPT-4. All right, cool. So we've got a new rhyming poem here. Sorry about the magnification. This is about as good as I can get it without breaking the screen. The blue sky is a wondrous sight. It fills me with delight. It stretches on forever, a never-ending cover. So I don't know how good that rhyming is going. So let's force it to rhyme here. Make it rhyme. So just like ChatGPT or GPT-4's live mode, chat mode, it will remember everything in that conversation thread. So I'm not having to tell it what to make rhyme. I can just complete the conversation. And it's just repeated itself here, which is pretty useless. This interface is nowhere near as beautiful as ChatGPT or GPT-4 in the chat interface, but and it's nowhere near as beautiful as OpenAI's Playground either, which is quite nice. Let's see if we can pop one of these open. Oh, I'm not logged in there, but you know what the Playground looks like. Google is looking very material UI here and very messy. I'm going to use Jack Clark's prompt. He's the former policy director for OpenAI. And he likes asking it how many, let's say, Apache helicopters, we should capitalize that, can I eat in one sitting? Let's get a capital on that just for fun. Oh, bad grammar here. I put a little dot in there. But large language models in 2023 are smart enough to play around with formatting. Last year, you had to be very, very thorough to get this to listen to you properly, to have perfect spelling and to have good responses, because it would check grammar. So PaLM 2 says it's not possible to eat an Apache helicopter in one sitting. Weighs too much. It's probably not good for you. It's dangerous. Please don't try. I would encourage you to give this a go with your favorite model. I think ChatGPT does okay with this. I'm not sure about Llama, but try this test because it's a really interesting way of seeing whether this would even work. It's really difficult to find default tests for some of these models, but I like Jack's example here because it's not something that's going to be embedded in the data set. It's not completely new, but it won't be recorded in the data set, but it's a really good way of testing. You come up with your own prompts. Let's jump into ChatGPT here and try that same example, see what we come up with. Getting stuck in an endless loop of logins here in ChatGPT. This is GPT 3.5 ChatGPT, and if I ask the same thing with the same bad grammar, ChatGPT does pretty well. My estimate is that ChatGPT is also somewhere around the 100 billion parameter mark, and the version of PaLM 2 that we're able to use here, Bison, is only the second largest. All right. Any other examples you'd like us to try, and we'll throw it in here. Otherwise, it's pretty much exactly the same as interacting with GPT-4. I did note that this PaLM 2 is 1/3 of the size, about 34% of the size of GPT-4, but maybe triple the size of ChatGPT, noting that they didn't follow Chinchilla exactly. They're using 11 words per parameter instead of 20 words per parameter. So they're training it with perhaps half the amount of data that they should have. And in some ways, if we're reading this correctly, they've been a bit disingenuous in the technical paper where they've indicated that they've proved the Chinchilla alignment. They've proved that Chinchilla and training with more data works. And then they've not really said that that's what they've used. And according to our media sources, they haven't used that. All right. Let's clear our conversation, see what else we've got here. I used to ask Lita some pretty fun questions. Why are sewer covers round? This may be in the dataset, and we'll talk about datasets in a moment. So this is an interview question from Google. You'd probably find this in a Google search. I'm looking for PaLM 2 to give me a concise response here. More stable than other shapes, easier to manufacture, more aesthetically pleasing, but didn't hit the two big points that even GPT-3 hit, which is that it can't fall in and it's the same shape as the pipes. Thanks for your response here to our Apache helicopter question. Monotron asks, is it a better answer if models reply that Monsieur Mangatot ate a plane piece by piece? I know of a guy who ate a bike piece by piece as well. So it's not a completely accurate response. You're right. It's just a great question for it to play around with. Awesome. I will duck in for questions and answers. I will duck in and out of these. ChatGPT plugins are absolutely insane. They are multiplying the power of ChatGPT to extraordinary levels. I played around with ER diagramming the other day. You would imagine that if someone asks that a question like, can I create an ER diagram from scratch with ChatGPT? The answer is probably no, except that ChatGPT is very good at spitting out ER diagram code, or let's call it language, which you can then go and plop into another application. Using plugins, you can get ChatGPT to create this kind of diagram and other electrical diagrams or other flow diagrams. That's one example. Then you've got Wolfram. Then you've got other examples that allow you to control a browser, and the list goes on and on. I'm looking forward to talking more about plugins. So thank you for that question. Yeah, there are so many. That's a completely different video. Wanted to mention that PaLM 2 has been rumored to be just an extension of Google's T5 from October 2019, or Google's U2 or UL2, which came out just after, where have I got this one? Just after PaLM 1, May 2022. So they've used the concepts from T5 and UL2 for PaLM 2. It's not an extraordinary model. It's not a huge groundbreaking effort. It's basically Google filling in the blanks and trying to catch up with GPT-4 and making something publicly available. And to that end, they've done a really good job. This is a usable model. It replies pretty quickly and it replies very solidly in comparison to GPT-4. It's somewhere in between ChatGPT, GPT 3.5, and GPT-4, both in size and performance. I wanted to mention performance because that's what I do. That's my favorite part of this. It's the reason I left human intelligence design, is because artificial intelligence was getting so much smarter. We've got a range of tests that we can try out with these things. I released a report card for PaLM 2. I've had to provide a number of revisions for this. This is revision 4. Parameter count and tokens at the top. You'll see that it's not really used enough tokens. These should be aligned. We talked about the fact that the dataset was not disclosed, but I have given an indication of that on the site. We'll look at that at the moment. In terms of performance, PaLM 2 is the very first model to breach the 90% mark on Winogrand. Winogrand is this advanced version of Winograd, and it's basically a way of testing an AI at a human level or beyond. It's thorough, and it's something that humans do not do very well at. I don't know if I've got the human metric in there, and I can't remember it off the top of my head. But PaLM 2 has achieved 90.9% in Winogrand, beating GPT-4's 87.5%. So PaLM 2 is the current benchmark state of the art for this particular metric. It's not doing too badly on MMLU, the other big benchmark. It gets 81.2% fine-tuned versus GPT-4, which is about 4 or 5% higher than that. If we're talking about comparative percent, it's even higher. But it's not state-of-the-art for MMLU, and I do rely on that particular benchmark. It's somewhere between ChatGPT and GPT-4. It also did pretty badly on Superglue, which is one of my favorite benchmarks. You'll see Superglue in my IQ Testing AI visualization. Let's pop this one open for a second because it's pretty important. It's this one here. Superglue was designed by Meta AI, New York University, DeepMind, Samsung. The original PaLM scored 90.4%. PaLM 2, 86.4%. So it would be underneath Google's T5. It's really not doing well there. And they hid the score. They made me calculate it myself. They didn't even reference it properly as Superglue. They gave acronyms for this particular test. But in Superglue, which is a very well-designed benchmark test, PaLM 2 did particularly poorly. Below human baseline, below PaLM 1, certainly below GPT-4, but I haven't seen those results or I don't have those top of mind. It wouldn't even fit on this chart. Superglue, 86.4% by my calculations. On this report card, I also mentioned that it didn't address truthfulness. We need to start addressing truthfulness. This is the next metric for artificial general intelligence. If we use Anthropic's HHH, helpful, honest, harmless, it has to be honest. And it has to be harmless, which means it needs some sort of groundedness. A lot of labs are working on this at the moment, but Google released no information on the truthfulness of PaLM 2. And openness, I gave a B because it is available via API, but it's not in all countries, so it's very similar to GPT-4's release. I gave this a passing mark after further assessment. It'd probably average out to a B or so. Got some inconsistent colors there as well. You can download that at lifearchitect.ai/report-card, and there's a few others there as well. All right, where did we get to? Data sets. I didn't think this model deserved its own page because we're going to leapfrog it really soon. So if you want to read more about this, lifearchitect.ai/bard. They recently swapped out the model underneath Bard from Lambda 2 to PaLM 2. And I've given my best guess on what the dataset might look like for PaLM 2 here, just bringing in what they used for Lambda 2. So the Infiniset, it was called, used a lot of dialogue, Common Crawler standard, a lot of code. We're finding out more and more that code helps with these models' reasoning. It helps with their ability to reason about the world, which is perhaps unexpected, but basically when it steps through the logic of a code base of software language, it's then able to make better task planning, better planning in general, and understand more about the world from software code. Who would have thought? Wikipedia, web documents in English and also web documents in non-English. PaLM 2 is multilingual, and we'll look at that in a moment. Remember, this was 3.6 trillion tokens. I've only got 2.8 trillion tokens here, so there's another nearly trillion or so that might come from somewhere in the DeepMind multilingual dataset called Massive Text. This thing's huge, 6 trillion tokens. 5 trillion tokens originally. I've added a further trillion tokens for discussion, which Google revealed as part of PaLM 2's dataset. Hope that's pretty clear. It's using a lot of data as standard. It's not using as much data as GPT-4. GPT-4 used 20 trillion tokens. PaLM 2 using 3.6 trillion tokens. All right, where are we at with questions? Non-edible Apache helicopter. There's a lot of exciting stuff going on at the moment. This is kind of third priority for me at the moment because PaLM 2 is exciting. It's the second largest model in the world, but I'm currently very much obsessed with consciousness in AI. And if you're part of the memo, you'll see my behind the scenes prep with a famous Cambridge expert where we're going to be looking at consciousness. You could call it sentience, you could call it awareness, you could call it aliveness in AI. And the author of Sapiens just stood in front of a crowd in Switzerland and said the first non-organic life forms are here. So we're going to be talking with a Cambridge biologist all about that. Obsessed with that part, and then very much looking at embodiment of artificial intelligence. It's happening right now. I don't know why more people aren't talking about it. It's like the news cycle is a year or two behind. They're just catching up with LLMs. Meanwhile, we've got this incredible stuff happening with 1X Neo, which OpenAI has just invested in and partnered with. It's essentially a clothed, physical, embodied robot backed by a large language model, not pre-programmed, like Boston Dynamics robots, like Atlas and the dog, Spot. 1X Neo, you're going to be hearing more about in the next couple of months. They say it's going to be released mid-2023, fully autonomous, fully independent. I talk about it more in the memo, both this edition from this morning and a couple of editions ago where we get more hands-on with Neo. So that's my obsession at the moment. But today we're just on PaLM. Any questions, and we will jump into what you want to know. Any thoughts on why they chose the number of tokens that they did? Their hand was kind of forced for PaLM 2 in that they want to be a big model. So they want to be somewhere around 1 trillion parameters. But to get there, they have to use 20 trillion tokens. You need 20 trillion tokens for 1 trillion parameters. 20 trillion tokens is 40 terabytes of clean text or somewhere around there. That's really, really hard to find. No one's found that besides OpenAI yet. The best we've got is Google's Infiniset and DeepMind's Massive Text, which are both a lot smaller than that. So their hand was forced to basically get a big model. They need a lot of tokens. They need a lot of data. Yeah, I hope everyone is playing around with Pi by Inflection. You can get there at heypi.com. We don't know how big this model is, but we do know that it was created by some pretty big tech gurus. So it's a reliable chatbot model, comparable with ChatGPT, but it doesn't do what ChatGPT does. It doesn't create HTML or it doesn't have plugins. It's just for conversation. Questions about Sam Altman and Congress. I addressed that in the memo from this morning. I think most of that is open for free subscribers, and I'd encourage you to become a full subscriber of the memo. Yeah, Ben D. I love the fact that we ask these questions now and then the answer to these changes within weeks or months. When can we expect a decent assistant? Does all our clerical stuff for us at home? This is already happening in some ways. You can use ChatGPT to do this with the plugins. And then we had Act 1. Well, let's see if we can open this up. By Adept.ai. I believe Vaswani is part of Adept.ai. He was the creator of Transformers. And this one interacts with your browser. If you're looking for someone that's physical, something that's physical, very, very soon. I talk about embodiment in today's memo, the 19th of May 2023, with 5 or 6 different announcements, including Amazon's announcement. There was another very big announcement. Rather than telling you how big it was, let me just crack this one open. too many things to remember. All right, here was the big stuff from the memo where we talk about embodiment. Tidybot, which I loved. Clean your house for you. Sanctuary AI Phoenix. It's worth watching this video. We'll be able to move around your house and be an assistant for you. These are not pre-programmed. These are large language model backed physical embodiment. We also have the Tesla bot update. Again, these things need clothes. I mentioned the Amazon update. It's called Burnham, and they give some examples of how this could be an assistant around the home. Finding the owner and bringing stoves, water faucets running to the owner's attention. It can check to make sure you're okay if you fall. Can tell you where your keys are. It can monitor whether the kids had friends over from school. This is a very, very early version of what I'm talking about. It's just the fact that they had talked about embodiment here, but the more advanced versions will be able to, fix your plumbing, make your toast, make your coffee, do the vacuuming, whatever you'd like it to do. They will be acting as complete assistants. Mr. Schenk J, what is Google Gemini? So the reason I'm not spending a lot of time on PaLM 2 today, I missed your name there. The reason I'm not spending a lot of time on PaLM 2 today is that PaLM 2 in some ways is going to be leapfrogged within weeks or months. So Google have mentioned that Gemini is currently being trained. They're already on the way to it being completely trained, hitting convergence. I've documented it here in a coming next bubble. Gemini is the next large language model for Google, partnered with DeepMind, probably using TPU version 4 or even TPU version 5, which has been documented in a couple of science papers already. It potentially will be 2 trillion parameters, so it will be twice the size of GPT-4. My calculations aren't that good, but is that about 8 times bigger than PaLM 2? The reason I'm not talking about PaLM 2 too much, even though this is a PaLM 2 live stream. Gemini is going to be groundbreaking. I think they're going to be able to hit early artificial general intelligence with this one, that it's going to be so smart that it's going to surprise a lot of people. In their talking about this, and the CEO talked about it live, he said, where is it? It's already exhibiting multimodal capabilities never before seen in prior models. So Gemini must be already converged at about, let's say, 500 billion parameters, perhaps. And perhaps they're aiming for 2 trillion parameters. And then they'll make it available to the public. Wow, Substack is noisy, isn't it? For me, this will be the most exciting model to come out alongside GPT-5. I can't imagine anything bigger than this. Google have the resources, the data, the compute, and the brains to train this model. I can't say the same thing for Anthropic. They use Google's compute. They have some brains from OpenAI. I don't know if they have access to the same data that Google has access to. Remember also that Google owns YouTube. Imagine transcribing every YouTube video that's available. So if we're looking for 40 terabytes of clean text data or more, that's one way to hit it. And you'd actually need to hit 80 terabytes of clean text data to give you 2 trillion parameters, 40 trillion tokens. Wow. If this doesn't hurt your head, it probably should. We're talking about huge models here. And like Google have said, this is already showing new capabilities with multimodal understanding. We saw that with GPT-4. So GPT-4, when it took a math test via text, it got, I think it was in the 80th percentile. when it took the same math test with both text and vision, so it could see the exam paper, it could see the charts, it could see the layout of the algorithms, the equations, it got above the 90th percentile. So massive improvements just because it can see. And I think Gemini is going to be very similar to that. All right, how are we going? Jason asking about the 100K context window. Yeah, I think this is a massive leap ahead. I talk about that in today's memo, this morning's memo, 19th of May, 2023. I don't know how they've achieved it. I don't think it's by database summarization. I think they've actually opened this up. I don't know the technical parts of that. I will be very upfront about not knowing exactly how they've achieved that. There have been some big context windows as well, besides what Anthropic have achieved. So there've been 8,000, 32,000, like we've got with GPT-4, but 100,000, which is 75,000 words of short-term memory of context, basically means that you could feed an entire book to Anthropic's Claude Next, or whatever they've got as a name for the model with 100,000 tokens of context window. You could feed it that book and say, give me a one-sentence summary. Or you could give it a one-sentence summary and say, write me a new book. That stuff is going to be outrageous. Imagine being able to use that with saying, here's the Harry Potter book, write me a screenplay, write me the film in the style of Chris Nolan. or the director of Titanic. Wow, my brain is not working today. James Cameron, thank you. It's extraordinary. It's going to be really extraordinary, and in a way, it's already extraordinary. The potential for this is just amazing. Brooke's got an interesting question here, aligned with what's happening with with PaLM 2, but also with Gemini. I'll make sure we get her quote properly. Because Google has so much data, do you think it'd be possible one of their models could leapfrog ChatGPT? So just for context, ChatGPT is pretty small. On this chart, we might say that ChatGPT, as a guess, is somewhere around this chinchilla size. It's not particularly big. It's just had some interesting fine tuning. So, to your point, a lot of things are bigger than ChatGPT. PaLM 2 has leapfrogged ChatGPT, of course. It's bigger. I don't know if it's fine-tuned enough to be better. PaLM 2 has not leapfrogged GPT-4, but I think Gemini will. And Gemini perhaps already is, based on what they're saying. Larry Kelly, I like your question here. I've been doing some consulting with governments about agency, about agentic behavior. Are you aware of any upcoming AIs that don't need a query before coming up with output requests? And we'll have more of this discussion in my next big video. You can see a behind the scenes of that video right now if you're a full member of the memo, where we talk about consciousness and agency in artificial general intelligence. That these things do need prompting at the moment. But we've already got some big people saying that AGI is only 2 years away, end of 2025. In today's memo, I referenced the fact that, where is he? A DeepMind AGI safety engineer and an OpenAI governance researcher says that these models will understand that they are neural networks. They will have human-level situational awareness very, very soon. And very, very soon means a few months away, as I've been saying earlier this year. A few months away, not a few years away. So not next year, but the next year, but the year after. And look, You can quote me on that, and it could be earlier. It could be next year. Remember that Microsoft went on record and titled their paper about GPT-4 the first look at an early AGI. They called GPT-4 an early AGI. They edited out that title and called it Sparks of AGI instead. But depending on your goalposts for measuring artificial general intelligence, which for me is a machine that can operate at human levels of performance in any discipline, including hands-on stuff, fixing the plumbing, mining the iron ore, building a house. That's a little way away, but the knowledge part of it has already been surpassed across the board. It's a little bit difficult to see this chart because it's so small, the writing's so small. Let me zoom in a little bit on the left here. We've got things like the psychology, theory of mind, the biology, Biolympiad, and the SAT there, the three at the top, where GPT-4 is vastly outperforming humans in this mental calculation or the thought process. Next up is embodying this into a robot, giving us some physical interaction with the world. And I'm going to be very excited to see that. At what point will AGI have emotional intelligence? It depends what you mean by emotional intelligence. Lita showed emotional intelligence all the way back in 2021. So more than 2 years ago, I would ask, how are you feeling today? And she would give a response. If you're talking about empathy and emotional intelligence, I've got this chart right here. It's the documentation of ChatGPT versus real human doctors. It says that ChatGPT is preferred by both physicians and patients over real doctors. It's more empathetic. It's actually 780% more empathetic from memory, 7.8 times more empathetic than a trained human doctor. I'm going to let you sit with that for a moment. Oh yeah, I've glossed over Lita, you're right. If you want to watch Lita, LifeArchitect.ai/Lita, L-E-T-A, will take you to some background on her and you can go and watch. I think we're at 67 episodes. She's at 3.5 million views. She's being featured by ABC Catalyst in the next few weeks. She's part of the Internet Archive. So that's a historical record of what GPT-3 has been saying for the last 2 years. And it's no longer state of the art. The conversations were fantastic. They don't look dated. In some ways, it's smarter than ChatGPT because it has no guardrails. It's not been muted or hamstrung. But we've got something that's perhaps 100 times better now with GPT-4. 1 trillion parameters, multimodal, the ability to see, perhaps the ability to interact with the world when we've embodied ChatGPT, GPT 3.5, and GPT-4 in different robots. It's a very exciting time. All right, Jason, let's see if I can address your question before I even read it. Does AGI require built-in memory capabilities that can expand over time? What's your best guess on how that memory architecture would look? So my understanding of this at the moment, here's how it looks. You've got context window, which we just said we can get out to 100,000 tokens. We can have a short-term memory context window of a book, which is more than a human. Then you've got long-term memory. That's already at 1 trillion parameters, 40 terabytes of text, let's say 20,000 words. Is that right? No. 20 trillion words, my mistake. No human is able to remember that much. No human can memorize 40 terabytes or 20 trillion words. So it's already outperforming for long-term memory, which is the training data that gets us to our parameters. It's already outperforming for short-term memory, which is our context window. For architecture for memory, for learning as it goes along, which I think is part of your question, the labs are actually concentrating on this right now. I think OpenAI is concentrating on this more than it's concentrating on GPT-5, they want it to be able to learn in real time, both with a global memory, which could just be a differential or a delta added to the training, added to the model after it's reached convergence, or it could be a local memory. And that might be, like you say, or you don't reference it exactly there, it might be going out to ping a database or a data store. So expect that to happen. I can't remember who mentioned that. It was OpenAI or DeepMind or Meta AI. There's a lot of those in my head who basically said what we're going to do now is get models to convergence and then add training data on top of that. So add the latest news. I think it was OpenAI. If you want to know more about that, it will be somewhere in LifeArchitect.ai/memo. Mr. CC, thanks for joining us as usual. What have we got here? Thank you for giving Lita a purpose in our physical existence. That's very sweet. Thanks. We did put GPT-4 behind Lita recently. As soon as I can, I'll be sitting an embodied physical robot in this office and showing you what it can do. Won't that be fun, where it can look around and interact with the world? Lita could look around. When we were using QuickChat.ai's Emerson, it actually had eyes. So I would take photos for it and show it photos of things, as well as holding up fingers and saying, Lita, how many fingers am I holding up? And it would actually give us an answer. Remember, that's 2 years ago, and that's based on technology from 3 years ago. Imagine what we've got going on right now. All right. Yes, Anthony, we will be focusing on empathy as well as intelligence. Brooke, yes, Pinecone for database. Absolutely. There are different mechanisms for playing around with that. If you want to know more about Pinecone, you can have a look at pinecone.io. Awesome. Have we got everything from PaLM 2? We addressed 340. We're back. Imagine paying for the world's best internet in Perth for a gigabit per second, and getting internet that drops. I'll be having conversations. Here is Model Garden. And it gives a bit of detail about these. What I was looking for was their documentation on providing this for free during this trial period. Welcome back. Not sure what happened in our drop there from your perspective. Will AI invent stuff soon, Mr. CC? Absolutely. Already happening in some ways. I can't give examples of theorems that it's come up with or inventions that it's come up with, but I will definitely go and document that. Yuval Harari interview. Yes, we mentioned that earlier, where he said we are now in a place where we have our first non-organic life forms. I'll be talking about this in detail in my next big video featuring a very famous Cambridge biologist, because I think when you bring in people who have very specific expertise and have been working on their field or domain for, in his case, I think it's 4 or 5 decades, we might as well draw on that knowledge. And this is becoming less of a computer science discussion and more of a whatever niche discussion. Sometimes it's for economists. We heard from the Microsoft economist recently. Sometimes it's for philosophers, and we heard from John Patrick Morgan when we talked about AI alignment. This one, I think, is for like biology, anthropologists, sociologists, philosophy to a certain extent. But yeah, the interview or the keynote from Yuval Harari in Switzerland was eye-opening to hear him say that we are now in a place where we're seeing our first non-organic life forms. And this is not a rarity. All of these big academics that I can see are saying big things that you would not expect them to say. Let's talk a little bit about guardrails, because I think that's worth mentioning. ChatGPT and GPT-4 and PaLM 2 have some fairly significant guardrails. You're referencing something inside NVIDIA, and I don't know if I have that one off the top of my head. Excellent internet. Some of them have fine-tuning data sets that they can use. It's a, you know that quote about democracy being the worst form of government except for all the others? I think that's the case for our current method of alignment. Our current guardrails, we need them. Rewriting this, I would say, 2020. And apologies for the buffering, that is absolutely at my end, which is... We're going to wrap up here, friends. We'll see how the internet goes with playing us out with the memo. Thanks for joining this morning. We'll get there.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah. I have the memo right here.
Readying yourself and your family for integrated AI? Get the #1 paid AI newsletter, Artificial Intelligence That Matters, as it happens in plain English.
Did you get that memo?
Yeah, I got the memo.
Join readers from Microsoft, Google, DeepMind, and government.
Yeah, didn't you get that memo?
LifeArchitect.ai/memo.
I have the memo.
Did you see the memo about this?
Yeah, I have the memo right here.
Readying yourself and your